Today, I will tell you a story that is more than 3,000 years old. A story about a hero who became immortal, not thanks to the gods, but thanks to memory. His name was Achilles. You will learn why his mother tried to make him invulnerable, and why she failed. How the future hero hid from the war in a dress, and who exposed him. Why he refused to fight, and what brought him back to the battlefield, blazing with anger. How his duel with Hector unfolded, and why even after victory Achilles did not find peace. Who caused his death, and what happened to him after he died. For this story has no simple ending. This is not just a biography. This is a legend, but a legend in which an astonishingly human fear is hidden. The fear of choice, the fear of loss, the fear of being forgotten. So make yourself comfortable, and let us begin at the very start. From the moment when there was not yet a Trojan War, but there was already a boy destined to become a symbol of heroism forever. Share your ideas for future videos in the comments and hit that subscribe button. New bedtime stories come out here daily. The story of Achilles does not begin with war, not even with his birth. It begins with a prophecy, and with the way the gods, accustomed to ruling all things, recoiled in fear. Thetis was a sea goddess, one of the Nereids, the daughter of the old man Nereus and the Oceanid Doris. Like her sisters, she dwelt in the depths of the sea, where silence, ancient power, and cold hold sway. But she was special, so beautiful and majestic that even the highest gods burned with desire for her. They say that both Zeus and Poseidon sought her love, each in his own way. But then fate intervened. An oracle, according to some, Prometheus, according to others, the goddess of justice Themis, proclaimed, the son of Thetis would be stronger than his father. He would surpass him in strength, in glory, and perhaps one day would challenge him. This changed everything. For a mere mortal, this would have been a blessing. For the immortals, a threat. Zeus, on hearing the prophecy, drew back. Poseidon silently retreated. Neither wished Thetis to bear one who might become a new force in the pantheon. They decided to give her in marriage to a man, to a mortal. Thus began a chain of events that no one would later be able to stop. Thetis did not want this union. She refused marriage with a man, hid, and changed her shape. First, water, then fire, then beasts, serpents, birds. But the man destined for her was no ordinary one. His name was Peleus. He was a hero, king of the Myrmidons, a descendant of Aeacus, the grandson of Zeus himself. He fought beside Heracles, took part in the Caledonian hunt, and won renown for valor and honor. There are several versions of how he won Thetis as his wife. In one, he simply fell in love, saw her on the shore, and with the help of Chiron, the wise centaur, tracked her down and seized her, not letting go until she ceased her transformations. In another, the gods themselves helped him, so that everything would proceed according to plan. One way or another, the wedding took place. And it was no ordinary wedding. It was a feast attended by all the great powers of that time. The gods of Olympus gathered: Zeus, Hera, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Hermes, Demeter. There were titans, spirits of nature, the muses, nymphs, satyrs, even the Moirae, the spinners of fate. It was a union meant to reconcile the worlds of gods and humans. Gifts flowed like a river. Athena gave the bride a shield forged from drops of dew. Hephaestus, a diadem shining like the sun. Apollo played the cithara. Artemis adorned the bridal bed with flowers. But there was one who was not invited. Eris, the goddess of discord. Perhaps they simply forgot her. Or perhaps they decided that her presence would bring nothing but trouble. But she came of her own accord. The celebration was in full swing when Eris entered the hall. No one dared to stop her. She did not shout, did not curse, did not make a scene. She simply walked up to the table, drew from the mist a golden apple and threw it into the middle. Upon it was inscribed, "To the fairest." Silence fell. 3 goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, reached for it at once. Each considered herself worthy. Each was certain the apple was meant for her. From that moment, the wedding feast became the beginning of a great enmity. Zeus, seeing that the quarrel would not subside, refused to judge it himself. Instead, he ordered that a mortal be chosen to decide. He was Paris, a young shepherd and Trojan prince, the very one who would later abduct Helen, the very one who would start the Trojan War. Paris would choose Aphrodite in exchange for the promise of the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. And that choice would set in motion the conflict in which all the peoples of Hellas would meet. But that had not yet happened. For now, the feast, the apple, the offense, and a world beginning slowly to crack. After the wedding, Thetis went to live with her husband in Phthia, in the northern part of Greece. Their union was not out of love, but it was sanctioned by the gods. They settled in the palace of Peleus. And there, amid ordinary human affairs, in the world between 2 natures, divine and mortal, Thetis conceived a child. No one knows exactly how her pregnancy passed. The myths do not say. Only one thing is known for certain. All Olympus held its breath. The son of Thetis was special even before birth. He was the continuation of the prophecy, the answer to the fears of the gods. He was the one they both feared and awaited. And at last, he was born. Fair-haired, strong as a young lion, the son of a goddess and a mortal king. They named him Achilles. When Achilles came into the world, his mother, the sea goddess Thetis, did not rejoice as an ordinary mortal woman would. She looked at him as those look who already know the ending. She did not forget the prophecy. Her son would become great, would surpass his father, but might die too soon. Thetis could not accept that her child would die. She had lived for centuries, knew a world without age and pain. But now she had borne a son who with each day would draw closer to death. And she decided, no, death is not for him. There are different myths about what she did. The most famous speaks of the river Styx. Thetis took the infant in her arms, descended to Tartarus, to the very boundary of the world of the living and the dead, and dipped him into the waters of the underworld river. The Styx did not simply flow, it burned. Its waters were deadly, but granted a special power to those who endured them. Holding Achilles by the heel, Thetis plunged him into the river. His body became invulnerable. His skin could not be pierced. Swords and arrows could not harm him. But the heel by which his mother held him remained dry, vulnerable. It is this story that gave birth to the expression Achilles' heel, a weak spot even in the strongest. But there is another version, an older, harsher one. In it, Thetis did not go to the Styx. Each night she anointed the baby's body with ambrosia, the food of the gods, and then held him over a fire. The flames burned away all that was mortal, searing out weakness. She did this silently, with concentration. Not like a mother, but like an ancient power that had decided to forge immortality. At night, Achilles cried, and by day, she continued, again and again, until one day Peleus entered and saw his wife holding their son over the flames. He cried out. He thought she was killing the child. Thetis looked at him in silence and vanished. She returned to the sea from which she had come. Peleus never saw her again. She left, not because she did not love, but because she could no longer save. Achilles remained, almost invulnerable, almost immortal, and utterly alone. Peleus did not know how to raise such a son. He was a brave warrior, a just king, but not a god. He felt that his son would be too great for the palace, too swift for ordinary life. And so he did what the best fathers of heroes did. He gave his son to be raised by the wisest of all, the centaur Chiron. Chiron lived on Mount Pelion. He was unlike the other centaurs. While his kin feasted, got drunk, and raced through the forests, Chiron lived in seclusion. He knew astronomy, music, medicine, the hunt, the arts of healing and prophecy. He had reared many: Jason, Asclepius, Orpheus, and now Achilles. The young hero settled in a cave on Pelion. His days were strict and simple. In the morning, running along the mountain slopes. Then, archery. Then, herbs, wounds, bandages. Chiron taught him to find rare plants, to apply dressings, to reduce fever. Achilles knew how to stitch a wound, how to stop bleeding, how to tell a poisonous leaf from a healing one. He played the kithara. He was called to dinner not by loud shouts, but by melodies. He composed songs that held something of the wind, something of pain, something of the glory to come. But most of all, he ran. According to tradition, Achilles was the swiftest of mortals. His feet barely touched the ground. Chiron said, "You were not born to stand still." And he did not stand. He raced along the paths, leaped across ravines, ran over gravel, over grass, through puddles, and always faster than anyone. He caught hares with his bare hands. He bested deer without weapons. He stalked birds like a shadow. He was not merely strong, he was attentive, and when needed, silent. Chiron taught him not only to win, but to restrain himself. A true hero knows when to strike, but even more, when not to strike. Gradually, Achilles became a youth. His shoulders grew strong, his voice deepened, his gaze hardened. He already knew he was different from others. He felt he would not live like everyone else. But for now, he studied. For now, he ran. For now, he lived in the mountains, among silence, stars, and the voice of the centaur. Achilles grew. His body strengthened, his movements became precise, his voice assured. He was no longer a child. Everything Chiron had taught him was now part of himself. He was no longer merely a pupil. He had become the heir to strength. And yet, while he ran along the slopes of Pelion, while he trained in archery and healing, somewhere else the story for which he had been born was already beginning. On Olympus, the branches of fate stirred. In Troy, a city he had not yet heard of, events began to form that would soon shake the entire Greek world. It all began with that very apple, with the choice of Aphrodite by the Trojan Prince Paris, with her promise to grant him the love of the most beautiful woman in the world, a promise she kept. Helen, the wife of Menelaus, king of Sparta, was taken to Troy. The gods again took opposite sides in the conflict. The Greeks prepared for an expedition, and at that moment, fate turned back to Achilles. According to prophecy, the Greeks would not win without him. Only he could tip the scales of war. But there was a second condition in the prophecy. If Achilles went to the walls of Troy, he would die. There can be no victory without sacrifice, and no glory without an end. It was not the heroes who learned this first, but the gods. And then Thetis. Thetis came to Peleus and again demanded that their son be saved. While there was still time, a decision was made. Hide Achilles. far from prying eyes, far from oaths, far from calls to glory, somewhere no one would think to look. They chose the island of Scyros. There ruled an old king, Lycomedes, an ally, a reliable and taciturn man. His palace stood high in the mountains, hidden from strangers. He had many daughters, and not a single son. There, among the girls, Achilles could disappear. To dress a youth as a maiden seemed madness. But what is madness compared with fate? So began one of the most unusual chapters in the future hero's life. He was given a woman's name, according to some versions Pyrrha, the red-haired, after his hair. He put on women's clothing. His hair was braided, and he entered Lycomedes' palace as one of the daughters. At first everything felt unnatural. He moved too sharply, spoke too low, but the girls accepted him, took him for withdrawn, strange, but not alien. He began to grow accustomed. He joined in their pursuits, played the cithara, danced, sometimes sat with them in silence under the rain, staring into the clouds. Achilles was never a coward. He was not hiding from battle out of fear, but he knew. If he went to war now, he would die, and life, for all things, was dear to him. He was still young, yet the longer he lived on Scyros, the more he felt a strange longing, not only for weapons, for himself. He felt his heart did not want to be hidden. His hands itched to draw the bowstring, his chest to breathe freely. His body resisted submission. Meanwhile, something happened at the palace that Thetis may not have foreseen. One of Lycomedes' daughters, Deidamia, began to show him special attention. She was drawn to this strange girl with the piercing gaze, and he did not push her away. The myths do not record exactly how it happened. Perhaps it began with a conversation at night, with a touch, with trust, or perhaps with a silent admission he was not who he claimed to be. In any case, a feeling flared between them. He revealed himself to her, not merely as a man, as a doomed human being, and she did not turn away. A few months later they had a child, a boy named Neoptolemus. He would play his part in the end of the war, but for now he was simply an infant in whom two destinies met, the hidden and the coming. Meanwhile, off the shores of Greece, an army was gathering. One by one the heroes pledged themselves: Agamemnon, Menelaus, Odysseus, Nestor, Diomedes. But the chief among them was missing. The seers said, "Without Achilles, Troy cannot be taken. He is the key. He is the ruin. He is the victory." Then Odysseus, the craftiest of all men, set out to find him. He arrived on Scyros in the guise of a merchant. He brought to Lycomedes' palace chests of gifts, jewels, ornaments, fabrics, mirrors, perfumes, and in one of the chests, a sword, a spear, and a shield. He entered the hall where the girls were gathered. He unpacked the wares. The girls rushed to the ornaments. They laughed, fingered the fabrics, tried on rings. Only one figure stood apart. She was looking not at the gold, but at the weapons. Odysseus noticed, and then without warning he ordered his men to raise a battle cry, as if an attack had begun. The room shuddered. The girls screamed in fright. All of them, except one. The figure in the woman's dress snatched up the sword in a flash and took a fighter's stance. Thus, Achilles was revealed. Odysseus stepped toward him. "Achilles, son of Peleus," he said, "the time has come." Silence. No one tried to stop them, not even Lycomedes. All were waiting. Achilles lowered the sword. He looked at the weapons. Then, at the sky. They say Thetis came to him again that night. She begged him to stay, implored him, offered another life, a bride, a son, a home, a long old age. He could have been happy, but he already knew. He said, "If I stay, the world will forget me. If I go, I will die. But my name will live as long as the songs live. He chose the path of the hero. At dawn he left Scyros. His road led to Aulis, to the ships, 2 oaths, to the war to come. He no longer hid. His name was spoken aloud once more. Achilles stepped out of the shadow, and now nothing could stop fate. The story in which Achilles will gain immortality begins not with swords, sieges, or enmity, but with a celebration, with a feast to which someone was not invited, and with an apple that no one dared ignore. At the wedding of Peleus and Thetis, to which all the gods of Olympus had been invited, one of them, Eris, the goddess of discord, was left aside. She had not been asked to come, for fear she would spoil the festivities. Eris came anyway, and without a word, threw a golden apple onto the table. On it was written, "To the fairest." In that moment, the feast turned into a quarrel. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, 3 great goddesses, laid claim to the title at once. None wished to yield. Their spat quickly grew into something more, and to end it, Zeus ordered that a judge be chosen. He was to be immortal, the Trojan prince Paris. Each goddess tried to win him over. Hera promised dominion over the world. Athena, wisdom and victory in battle, and Aphrodite, the love of the most beautiful woman the world had ever known. Paris chose Aphrodite. His reward was Helen, the wife of Menelaus, the king of Sparta, a woman whose beauty was deemed divine. In some versions, she followed Paris of her own will. In others, she was abducted. But the essence was the same. A king's wife was in Troy, and Menelaus's honor was insulted. Yet it was not merely a private grievance. Before Helen married, all the noble Greeks had sworn an oath. If anyone violated her union, the rest would join together to set things right. That oath now summoned them all. Every king, every hero, every clan had to answer. The Greeks began to prepare for war. The port of Aulis was chosen for mustering the forces, a convenient place from which to send ships eastward. One by one, kings and commanders gathered there. Odysseus from Ithaca, Nestor of Pylos, Diomedes of Argos, the 2 Ajaxes, of Salamis and Locris, and Idomeneus from Crete. The commander-in-chief was Agamemnon, Menelaus's elder brother and king of Mycenae. Hundreds of ships lined the shore. Thousands of warriors stood under arms, but one among them was still missing. The seer Calchas declared, victory was impossible without Achilles. He had to be part of the expedition, otherwise the whole plan was doomed. After the events on Scyros, Achilles arrived at Aulis, accompanied by the Myrmidons, a people devoted to him, whose fame went ahead of their steps. He was young, handsome, resolute. There was no fear in his gaze. He knew he was going to a war from which he would not return, but he had already chosen his path. And yet, though the army was assembled, the sea was silent. Days passed while the wind held still. The ships could not sail. Men grumbled. Calchas again sought the gods, and the prophecy sounded anew. Artemis was angry. While hunting, Agamemnon had killed her sacred deer, and in pride, boasted that he surpassed the goddess in marksmanship. Artemis did not forgive. For the wind to rise again, she demanded a sacrifice. Not a simple one, but a terrible one. She required that Agamemnon offer his own daughter, Iphigenia. Agamemnon wavered. As a father, he was shattered. As a general, he clenched his teeth. Pressure from the army, the expectations of allies, the oaths, and the duty, all pushed him toward what he did not want. By deceit, he summoned his daughter to Aulis, telling her she was to be wed to Achilles. By the time the truth was revealed, Iphigenia was already at the altar. In one version, she was sacrificed. In another, Artemis relented, substituted a hind, and carried the girl off to distant lands. Whatever truly happened, afterward the wind rose, the sails filled, and at last the army put to sea. The road to Troy was not instantaneous. The first stop was the island of Tenedos, where the Greeks regrouped. Then they landed on the coast of the Troad. Achilles set foot on the land of war neither timidly nor triumphantly, but with cold resolve. He was not yet the godlike hero he would later be called. But even in those first days, his fury stood out. He did not simply fight. He brought ruin. Not out of revenge, not for plunder, but because there dwelt in him a relentless force that could not be stayed. Before the siege began, he subdued more than 10 cities. Among them was Lyrnessus, the city where he took captive a woman named Briseis. At the time, it seemed a small episode, but later she would play an important role in his fate. Among the Greeks' early clashes before they reached Troy, one story was remembered especially, not for blood, but for an unexpected turn. It is the story of Telephus, king of Mysia. When the Greek fleet first put to sea, its path to Troy was not straight. Whether by mistake or by fate, the myths differ. They landed in Mysia, a little-known land in the north of Asia Minor. The Mysians took the Greeks for invaders, likely with good reason. The Greeks came ashore armed. The army was tense and ready to fight. Telephus, the king of Mysia, came out to meet them. Telephus was no ordinary ruler. He was the son of Heracles, and heroic strength ran in his blood. Young, strong, and seasoned in war, he did not intend to retreat. The battle flared quickly. There were many dead on both sides. The Greeks thought this was the beginning of the war with Troy. But they were mistaken. In this fight, Achilles first displayed his true might. He met Telephus face to face. The blows were terrible. Telephus fought worthily, but Achilles' spear was swifter. Telephus was grievously wounded. The Greeks then realized they had attacked not Trojans, but allies, and withdrew. Telephus was left lying, torn by his wound. But the wound dealt by Achilles would not heal. It burned as if with poison. Neither physicians nor priests could cure it. In desperation, Telephus went to the Delphic sanctuary and asked the oracle what to do. The answer was cryptic. He who wounded will heal. Suffering in pain, Telephus came to Aulis, not as an enemy, but as a supplicant. Limping and leaning on a spear, he pleaded with Achilles, "You took my strength. Give it back. Without you, I will die." Achilles was surprised but did not refuse. He was no maker of medicines. But Chiron, his teacher, had taught him not only how to inflict wounds, but how to heal them. In one version, Achilles scraped shavings from the shaft of his own spear and applied them to Telephus's wound. The wood linked to the hero himself worked as if by magic. The wound began to close. Healed, Telephus swore never again to fight the Greeks. Later, he would be the one to show them the way to Troy, for until then the army had wandered, not knowing the precise road. The Greeks looked at Achilles as at an omen. Even the most renowned warriors knew. He was different. There was something in him they could not fully grasp. He was young, yet fearsome, quiet, yet merciless, and his name began to pass through the camps as a name of power and of danger. Thus his fame began. Thus began the war in which heroes would gain immortality and fall, one after another. Several years had passed since the Greeks landed on the shores of the Troad. Besieged Troy still stood, proud, impregnable, encircled by walls raised at the gods' command. The Greeks awaited victory, but each new day brought only new battles, new losses, and new exhaustion. In this slow, viscous waiting, beneath the blazing sun and the cries of crows, Achilles kept fighting, and every one of his blows became a legend. He did not seek power, and did not take part in the councils of kings, but his name was spoken more than any other, in the whispers of allies and in the prayers of enemies. Among the conquered towns was Lyrnessus, a small but well-fortified settlement. After the victory, Achilles took captive a woman named Briseis. She was no queen, but of noble birth, and in her bearing, they said, there was both dignity and grief. Her husband had fallen in battle, her city had fallen, and she was left alone. Though he had come as a warrior, Achilles treated her with respect. He did not keep her as a mere war prize or turn her into a thing. In the camp, they whispered that she had become close to him. To some, a concubine. To others, a companion. But to Achilles himself, a person with whom one could be silent without feeling alone. The commander of the Greek army was Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, Menelaus's brother, a man of power, ambition, and far from flawless. His reward from one of the raids, a priestess of Apollo named Chryseis, was soon demanded back. Her father, an old priest named Chryses, came to the camp with gifts and begged for his daughter's return. Agamemnon refused. Insulted, the priest appealed to Apollo, and soon disease swept through the Greek camp. Men died swiftly. Panic seized the host. Calchas, called to interpret the god's anger, declared that the curse would not lift until Chryseis was returned to her father. Agamemnon, grinding his teeth, yielded, but in yielding, he demanded compensation. If he lost his woman, he would take another, Briseis, and he ordered that she be taken from Achilles. This was no mere political maneuver. It was an insult. Not simply because a woman was seized, but because Agamemnon publicly set himself above the rest. He showed that in this army there was no room for personal honor unless you were a king. Achilles took it as a spit not only in his face, but at the very essence of heroism. He was the one who won battles, who had saved the army more than once, who had never claimed a throne. And now he was thrown beneath the feet of ambition. Achilles did not shout. He did not reach for his weapons. He did not challenge Agamemnon to single combat. He simply left the council, returned to his tent, and declared that he would fight no more. Neither he nor his myrmidons. He withdrew from a war he no longer considered his own. To him, this army had ceased to be a league of heroes. It had become a crowd ruled by one man's pride. From that moment, the Greek host was deprived of its mightiest warrior, and though no one said it aloud, everyone understood. A shadow had fallen over their ranks. Without Achilles, counsels sounded hollow, attacks faltered, confidence melted away. While Achilles sat in his tent, wrapped in silence, the Trojans began to advance. They were led by Hector, the son of King Priam, brave, wise, and just, the true defender of his city. With him, the war changed. The Trojans no longer hid behind their walls. They pressed the Greeks hard on the plain. Hector led his men with the resolve of one who knows what he dies for. Day by day, the Greeks were driven closer to the sea. Their ships, once drawn high onto the shore, now became the last line of defense. And in this mounting despair, all remembered Achilles' name again. But he was silent. He did not come out. His tent was closed and his spear lay still. Beside him remained Patroclus, his friend, his comrade, the only one who dared to speak when others kept quiet. Patroclus was not as strong as Achilles, but he was deep and loyal. He saw how resentment boiled within Achilles. He saw how the sound of the war horns clenched his friend's fists. He understood that this silence was not weakness, but a wound inflicted not by an enemy, but by one of their own. Patroclus tried to persuade him to return to the field. He spoke of their companions, of the war, of the men dying, of the enemy already almost at their tents. But Achilles did not listen. or pretended not to. He sat by the sea as if waiting for the earth itself to acknowledge he was right. And yet, each evening, he heard the noise of battle. Each day, he learned who had fallen. And though his anger did not abate, another fire began to burn in his heart, the kind that scorches not the offender, but oneself. In this prolonged silence, Patroclus, feeling that they could wait no longer, prepared to take upon himself what he did not yet know, did not fully understand, and what would soon change everything. The threat drew near inexorably. Under Hector's command, the Trojans advanced step by step to the very ships, and what had seemed unthinkable was now becoming real. The Greeks were losing their footing, giving ground, wavering. Their forces, so long holding under Troy's walls, were now faltering, and ever more often the name of the one who had once been their hope was spoken. Achilles, the warrior who had refused to fight, unwilling to forgive an insult. He still remained in his tent, and each evening, gazing at the horizon, he stayed enclosed in a silence behind which seethed a wrath unloosed by injury. He knew his absence cost the army dearly, and still he did not raise his spear. His decision had been made, and to him, honor meant more than the cries of the dying. By his side in that silence, day after day, stood Patroclus, his childhood friend, his shadow, his opposite, yet also part of him. He knew Achilles suffered, though he did not show it, and he saw how each new report of the fallen seemed to crack his silence anew. Patroclus did not harry him. He waited. When it became clear that without intervention the Trojans would break the Greek camp and burn the ships, he resolved to enter the tent and speak what he had long kept inside. He did not ask Achilles to forget the insult. He did not say Achilles must return himself. He offered only this: if you are not ready to take up arms, entrust them to me. Let me wear your armor, draw up the myrmidons, and lead them into battle. Let the enemy think it is you and retreat. I will not chase glory. I only wish to stop the slaughter. For a long time Achilles did not answer. He looked at the ground, the earth, some point within himself. The inner knot tied by resentment and pain pulled tighter and tighter. But he knew Patroclus, knew that behind this request lay no lust for honor, only a sincere, inevitable impulse. And he nodded. In handing over his armor, Achilles seemed to give away a part of himself. He reminded Patroclus, drive the enemy from the ships, but go no further. Do not approach the walls of Troy. Do not cross the boundary beyond which begins not battle, but doom. Patroclus put on another's armor and became the likeness of whom he was not. The long, silent Myrmidons seemed to come alive. They formed their ranks, and when the horn sounded, their cry was like an earthquake. The Greeks who had lost hope heard a strength returned. The Trojans, seeing Achilles' glittering armor, faltered. They believed he had come back, and began to retreat. Led by courage and compassion, Patroclus plunged into the fray. He fought as if inspired, sweeping enemies aside one after another. The battle on the plain turned. The Greeks again felt the breath of victory. But then, dazzled by success, Patroclus forgot the line he had been forbidden to cross. In zeal and in the heat of triumph, he came to the very walls of Troy. There, at the very gates, Hector met him. Their duel was brief, but taut. Patroclus fought bravely, but without the unshakable assurance Achilles would have had. One precise blow, and the armor fell to the ground. Before he died, Patroclus is said to have spoken, "You have killed me, but soon you will meet the one who will avenge me." When the news of Patroclus's death reached the camp, no one dared be the first to go to Achilles. He sat as before, alone by the sea. When he heard the words, his face did not change. He slowly lowered his head, as if something had collapsed inside. Then he rose and cried out. They said that cry was heard not only in the Greek camp, but in Troy itself. His voice, filled with pain and fury, swept across the plain, and even the gods on Olympus, it is told, turned their heads. Achilles, whom nothing could compel to return, could no longer remain apart. He felt he had lost not merely a companion, but a part of himself, and now he needed neither fame nor recognition. He wanted one thing, that Patroclus be avenged. But he no longer had his armor. Hector had stripped it from Patroclus's body as a trophy. Achilles was left unarmed. Then he called upon his mother, Thetis. She came again, not with reproaches, not with pleas, but with the quiet borne by mothers who have outlived their children. He told her, I know that if I return, I will die, but I am already dead. Thetis went up to Hephaestus, the smith god, and he forged new armor for Achilles, such as no mortal had ever worn. A shield depicting the world, from shepherds to stars, from harvest to sunset, from birth to war. A helmet gleaming like flame, a corselet from which iron glanced away. He donned this armor and became other. He stood in the midst of the camp, and no one dared approach him. There was no boy in him anymore, no insulted man, not even merely a hero. He had become what he was destined to be from the beginning, a man with nothing left to lose. He did not crave glory. He wanted one thing, to bring his friend back. And if that was impossible, then at least to punish the one who had done this. Achilles returned to the battlefield, and from that moment, the war was never the same. When Achilles returned to the battlefield, the earth itself seemed to change its rhythm. The Greek army lifted its spirit as if the air had thickened with new weight. The silent fear pent up in the hearts of the Trojans burst forth. They saw him coming, not in formation, not under cover, as though he himself knew that no armor but his rage was needed now. He did not argue, did not obey orders, did not listen to counsels of war. He moved forward, and those who stood in his way scarcely had time to understand what was killing them. His spear flew like a thought, his blows were flawless, and each step seemed pushed on by fate. He was not fighting for victory. He was clearing a path. He was going after the one who had taken Patroclus from him. Hector, standing beneath the walls of Troy, knew this meeting was inevitable. He did not flee or hide, but inside, he felt. Now the fight was not merely a matter of honor, but a sentence with no right of appeal. In the city, they begged him not to go out. Priam implored him to stay within. Queen Hecuba pleaded, but Hector, son of Troy, understood. If he hid, the wall would fall sooner than stone. And he went out to meet the man whose pain had turned into power, whose fury ran deeper than the war, whose shadow already lay across the city. Before the battle began, there came a brief moment in which they simply stood facing one another. Hector, knowing he was likely walking to his death. Achilles, knowing that death was the one thing he no longer feared. No words, no shouts, no loud challenges, only a gaze in which everything had already been said. Hector attacked first, trying to use deftness and speed, but Achilles was faster. He who for years had been considered unbeatable among the Trojans could not even touch his foe. The gods watched in silence, not interfering. Only Athena, Achilles' patron, followed him unseen, pouring precision into his movements and strength into every blow. Realizing he could not prevail, Hector tried to speak to Achilles. If I die, return my body to my father. Do not deny me burial. But Achilles, his face emptied of anything human, answered, As you spared Patroclus, so I will spare you. He cast his spear and did not miss. Hector fell like a tree cut down in a field. He still breathed, still looked, when Achilles approached. But Achilles did not speak. He stripped the armor from the body, leaving only the face as a reminder. And then, on the blood-torn plain, a scene began that made even the gods shudder. Achilles tied Hector's body by the ankles to his chariot, and mounting it, he did not delay. He flew over the field, dragging behind him the man who had been Troy's pride. Dust rose high, stones tore flesh. The cries of Greeks and Trojans mingled together like the scream of the earth itself. 3 times the body of Hector circled the camp. No one could stop Achilles. He heard neither pleas nor curses nor entreaties. He looked ahead, as though at the end of that track he hoped to meet the one he had lost. Hector, once the proud defender, was now a shadow, and even his death brought no comfort. Achilles felt no relief. He stood in the camp, amid armor, amid bodies, amid cries, and understood. Vengeance was complete, but the emptiness had not vanished. His friend would not return. His soul still screamed. His starry shining shield reflected only pain. After Achilles brought down Hector and avenged Patroclus' death, his path did not end. The war went on, and though its breath grew quieter, there was neither peace nor ease in it. The victory for which they had striven so long brought him no solace. He had returned to the battlefield not for glory and not for triumph, but because he knew there was nowhere left for him to go back to. He had kept his vow, yet the pain, instead of fading, had become part of him. He fought relentlessly, without delay, not because he wished to, but because he could not do otherwise. Achilles' fame continued to grow, but he himself no longer sought songs or victories. He fought in silence with stubborn dignity, like a man performing life's final duty. There was a sense of inevitability in his every motion. He avoided arguments, ignored speeches, asked no advice, and the Greeks, though they praised his name, no longer dared look him in the eye. Then a new ally appeared among the Trojans, Memnon, son of the goddess Eos and king of the Ethiopians. Tall, majestic, surrounded by many loyal warriors, he came to Troy as an honored guest and long-awaited aid. Memnon was no brash youth. He did not flaunt his strength or his divine mother. On the contrary, his dignity seemed almost kingly. He did not shout for vengeance or go seeking a fight, but when the Trojans suffered, he raised his spear and went forward. Among those who fell to Memnon's hand was Antiquity, son of Nestor, one of the few whom Achilles respected and with whom he shared bonds of home and youth. Antilochus's death sparked in him a burst of pain he had long forbidden himself to feel. It was not revenge now, as it had been with Hector. It was a return to reality, a reminder that everything he touched seemed to vanish. Achilles challenged Memnon to single combat, openly, without fury, with cold resolve. Memnon accepted, knowing there was no avoiding this meeting. Their duel was a collision not only of strength, but of sorrow. Memnon fought nobly, and even the gods, they say, watched their struggle with unease. Yet Achilles, driven no longer by anger but by inner emptiness, proved the stronger. Memnon fell, and Eos, his mother, covered her son with her light and bore his body beyond the edge of the world, leaving the plain in silence. Almost at once thereafter, Penthesilea arrived before the walls of Troy, the queen of the Amazons, proud and fearless, with a band of warrior women at her side. She came not for trophies and not seeking anyone's favor, but because she believed a woman, too, had the right to take part in the great, even if that part ended in death. She hid neither behind walls nor in a tent, but at once demanded to be met in battle. Hearing of her arrival, Achilles once more took up his spear and, asking no counsel, went out to meet her. The duel was swift, like two currents joining in one channel. Penthesilea fought with grace and strength, with courage worthy of legend. Achilles allowed himself no mistakes, yet he could not but admit, before him stood an opponent destined for song. When her body fell to the ground, he removed her helmet to look upon her face, and in that instant, a strange stillness struck him. The face beneath the armor was young, almost childlike. In her gaze, already dimming, he saw not fear, but something close to peace. It was the second time in all the war that he felt how thinly drawn the thread was between life and humanity. He spoke no word, but the Greeks who witnessed the scene understood. Achilles' heart had cracked again, though no one could say exactly how. From then on he grew even more withdrawn. He ate little, slept hardly at all, took no part in councils. He went to battle as if by habit. He carried out each mission like a sentence. Even his enemies began to look on him not with hatred but with pity. He was too great to live. One day, in the thick of combat as the afternoon waned toward evening, an archer rose on the far flank. It was Paris, the very man whose choice had once sparked the war. He was no famed warrior, but that day his bow was drawn with uncommon sureness. The arrow, loosed from afar, did not fly for honor or strength or a frontal strike. It sought weakness and found it. They say Apollo guided his hand. The arrow flew over many fighters and reached the single vulnerable point on Achilles' body, the heel, the place where long ago his mother had held him when she dipped him in the Styx. He did not scream. He did not fall at once. He simply sank down, as if the weariness he had held at bay for so long had finally been allowed to become flesh. In his eyes, while he still breathed, there was no fear, only something like calm, perhaps even relief. When the Greeks ran to him, he was still alive. He looked at them, without asking, without reproach, only with farewell. And when his eyes closed, the sky darkened, not from weather, but because one of the brightest lamps of human strength had gone out. Achilles' death was not a defeat. It was a completion. Kings, heroes, even enemies felt. Now, everything would be different. With him ended an age in which a man could be almost a god, if only he dared go all the way. The death of Achilles shook not only the Greek camp, it echoed even within the walls of Troy. The Greeks, used to seeing him as an invincible force, suddenly found themselves without their highest support. The Trojans, who had lost so many sons to his hand, felt not rejoicing but a strange emptiness. Even the gods on Olympus, watching the war from on high, fell silent for a time, as if to mark that one had passed who was more than a mere warrior. His body, still gleaming in its armor, was brought into the camp. There were no wails or shrieks over him. They stood in long silence, and only the wind moving through the tents whispered something like a funeral song. His mother, the sea goddess Thetis, appeared once more. She rose from the foam, not as an immortal, but as a mother who has come to say farewell. She washed her son's body with water drawn from the depths, and with it, washed away a grief that no longer had words. They buried him with all the honors war can give. The mound raised over him was as high as the masts of the Greek ships, there by the sea, so that everyone who put in at those shores would see, here lies he who did not retreat when all others fell back. Beside him, as Achilles himself had ordered before his death, Patroclus was later buried as well, a brother not by blood, but in spirit, his ashes mingling with Achilles. After the funeral, a new struggle began, not for life, but for memory. His armor, forged by Hephaestus, became the subject of a dispute between two heroes, Ajax and Odysseus. Ajax, mighty, straightforward, just. believed that by right of strength he should bear it. Odysseus, deft, thoughtful, confident in his word, argued that Achilles' glory should pass to one who could not only fight, but also think. Judgment went in Odysseus' favor. Ajax, insulted and humiliated, lost his reason and soon his life. Thus the arms of Achilles became not a sign of continuity, but the beginning of another loss. Yet his memory did not live on in weapons alone. It was carried by the one in whom his blood flowed. His son, Neoptolemus, born of Diademea on the island of Scyros, arrived at Troy at the very end of the war. He was not his father, younger, harsher, less restrained, and it was he who was destined to perform the final act of the story. It was he who would kill King Priam, old and wise, before the altar, in the war's last flash of horror as Troy fell. It was he who would receive Briseis, once Achilles' beloved. But even after that, Achilles' name did not fade. Blind poets sang of him. Heroes going into battle whispered his name like a charm. Boys taking up a spear for the first time heard the tale of one who won, yet did not live to see the victory. Achilles' fate did not end with his body. It continued in those who lived after him, in those who took up his path, knowing that not everyone is granted to walk it to the end. He was a man. He was the son of a goddess. He was a hero who chose for himself a life short but blazing. And so his memory is not merely remembrance, but an eternal form of glory to which all who have ever stood between fear and honor reach out. Achilles died, but his name has never died.